Morning class, welcome back again. Now, the first video I did kind of go over chapter 1 and 2, kind of spoke about what is happening at the start of SunSun Johnson. We're going to continue, but today I'm going to have a little focus on the characters. Now, I want to clarify again that today's class is just going through what I would consider notes or discussions. Any questions or any thoughts that you have, please put it in the comment section. That way there can be some sort of back and forth or discussion between students, between me and the students. Anything you have to ask me, put it in the comments where I post this link. In any case, let me just do a quick rehash or a quick re-summary of chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 1. This chapter introduces the protagonist SunSun and the antagonist Jake. We also recognize that SunSun's wife had divorced him a year and a half ago, and two of his children, Brad and Arlene, stayed with their mother, while Rami, the narrator, willingly stayed with his father. The story begins with Drake addressing SunSun at Robin Hill for the money that was owed to him. SunSun gives him the Robin Hill as a payment, right? The title of the property as payment, and the chapter ends when SunSun and Rami leave Robin Hill for River Bottom with their mare, Marble, and their belongings on a cart. Last video we spoke about the idea of being on top and then having to drop down, so how that becomes symbolic. Chapter 2, SunSun and Rami work to get River Bottom organized and habitable. It took them 2 weeks to finish all the work. This chapter emphasizes how differently the children were treated. Arlene and Brad were treated tenderly, while Rami was made fun of by his friends because he stayed with his father after the divorce. There is also a comparison of Jake and SunSun's lives in this chapter, highlighting Jake's thriftiness and SunSun's excessive kindness. Ma consistently repeated to SunSun to be more wiser when making business decisions, but was ignored. We also learned that Jake gained his wealth by conning SunSun, and is given the nickname the Rake. So it's Jake the Rake by Ma. Also, when Rami went to visit his mother, he's surprised to see Jake relaxing in SunSun's favorite chair at Ma's house, foreshadowing for something to come. And Rami reports this to SunSun. Alright, so the first thing that we know that is clear is that the antagonist, right? The antagonist is Jake and the protagonist is Merton, right? And what we'll find is that we have to now look on characters. I have to focus on characters. Now, throughout each chapter, we're going to look on the characters and how they grow. But what we want to look on is how characters affect each other. Because that is actually the crux of a good story. You know, if we don't see the conflict, then what's the point of the story, right? Now, the first thing we have to look on is kind of descriptions of the characters. You know, so let's just do just some quick descriptions. There's this website booksnoke.weebly.com. I will post the link so that you guys can reread all of these summaries and all of these notes I'll have there. And the characters go as such. Rami Johnson is a son of SunSun Johnson, and he's known to be loyal because he stayed with his father when his mother and his siblings deserted him. He's also considered very mature because of how he's dealing with the downfall. Merton Johnson, otherwise known as SunSun, is a wonderful person and a caring person. He made quite a lot of foolish business decisions because he led with his heart. That's what we learn in chapter 2, that he's very nice, but the niceness makes people take advantage of it and it makes you lose a lot of money because he led with his heart. Jake Hibbertson is a heartless businessman who robbed, well, let's say robbed because he conned him, you know, but also SunSun, you have to look at the fact that SunSun made poor decisions of his house and all other possessions. Now, what we have to kind of look on now is how does Jake affect SunSun? And the best way that we can look at that is by going through some quotes, right, that we have here and then analyzing that decision. The first quote that I want to look on is on page 8 in chapter 1. And this one is more about Jake. And if you look, remember, this is all through the eyes of Rami, so we're kind of seeing the type of image that Jake puts out there. He climbed our stairs like a lord with a monopoly on everything in the world, and father led him into the room we called his office, where he kept his farm books and catalogs and accounts and bills, lots of the latter. Lauren did as he was told, then leaned against the car, picking his teeth with a straw. It was the first time that I wasn't interested in a car as talked about as a Jaguar. Instead, I wanted to eavesdrop on the proceedings, so I climbed the stairs weakly into the house and into my room, which once I had shared with Brad. Now, that more goes into the detail of what is happening. But what we have here, we can look back on the description of Jake. He climbed our stairs like a lord with a monopoly on everything in the world. That description of being a lord, having a monopoly, it shows how much Jake kind of is feared. It shows the type of power that Jake has built. This power comes from wealth, it comes from money, and it comes from attitude, how Jake puts himself out there as a businessman. So certain things that we have to start thinking is, how is Jake seen by the community? How then does that respect translate into how Jake does his business? And then how has that now affected SunSun? This con may have come from the fact that SunSun may have given Jake way more respect than he needed to. And it pushes Jake to make, it pushes SunSun to make these bad decisions. Another thing we can look onto is just the overall building of an antagonist. Most antagonists in a story tend to have that type of power, tend to have that type of image. And we have to look on how that type of power can influence somebody like SunSun Johnson, who is just way too loving to realize that this is what is happening. There are other ways we can look on SunSun and think that maybe SunSun is a little weak, and throughout the story we're hoping that he grows to be stronger. Who I think is strong as well too is Rami. We can look on Rami and see that he's very perceptive. And it is this perception that helps to lift SunSun up. As we know, a year and a half before this event, SunSun divorced Ma. And Rami stayed with SunSun, which shows that Rami probably noticed that SunSun was a little bit weaker and decided he wanted to stay with his father and help his father. This has nothing to do with who loves who more. I think he loves both his parents, right? But the idea is that he saw that his father needed that extra help. So he decided to stay to kind of support his father. Let's move to another quote. Remember, the usual thing is 3 quotes. In chapter 2, we have a little quote about SunSun. He was so much fun, perhaps too much, trusting everyone and being exploited by just about everyone. It didn't even seem to have bothered him, their exploitation of him. Ah, he'd say, people like those are not better than animals, and if you retaliate, then you become one of them. So what we look at now is Rami is showing that the softer side of SunSun, though there's some admirable qualities about how nice he is, how caring he is, Rami can't get over the fact that it is a kind of a sign of weakness, and he wants his father to be a lot stronger. This weakness bothers Rami. Now, when we look on what he's saying he's not even saying that what SunSun is doing is bad. It's just a little too much. The use of the term too much says to us that that attitude that SunSun has became detrimental. Right? It affected him. Okay. Now, after he told SunSun that when he went to visit Ma, that Jake was sitting in the chair, we notice that SunSun gets a little depressed, gets a little bothered. And listen how Rami, this is the last quote, listen how Rami describes that to us. I knew that I had touched something in him. He had changed since I had begun to speak to him of Jake's being at the house, almost savagely, not like him at all. He rammed tobacco from a pouch into his pipe and jammed it just as savagely between his teeth and lit it. Now, the first thing that I said when I said I wanted to discuss characters is how does one character affect the other? Here it is very obvious. Yes, we said that SunSun might be a little bit too soft, but he wasn't all soft. right? Now, what we're seeing is the news that Jake was there lit a fire inside of him. It changed him. It's almost like that was the wake up call that not only did Jake take his house on Robin Hill, but Jake was obviously going for more, right? If SunSun was seen as a nice, caring, warm person, family relationship is a theme that, if I said Jake, I meant SunSun. Family relationship is something that SunSun represented. And if Jake is going to take that family from him fully, then we're hoping that the response that SunSun will give is one of positive. Like, not, well, positive in terms of waking him up, making him want to be more proactive. You understand? So this is what I mean when we talk about effects. There's maybe a little bit of motivation, a little bit of growth that is now going to come out of the fact that Jake is now at Ma's house. What I really love about My Father SunSun Johnson is that while telling a story, we're learning about personal growth, human growth, how someone can be beaten down and find something to get back up. And then we'll also see how family relationship brings that together. In the next class, I'm going to focus a little bit more closely on themes, but I want us to look at how characters can drive a story. Characters aren't just vehicles for this to happen and that to happen and this to happen. Like, oh, Jake did that to SunSun, Rami did this to that, and no. Characters are there to teach lessons, to bring out themes, to help move the conflict forward so that we can see how the solution to this conflict comes about. And when we learn more about the characters, we get to understand motivations. We get to understand human nature. And that's one of the things that SunSun Johnson does very well. Now, my discussion topic that I want you guys to discuss in the comment section is, do you think that Jake is right for what he did? Do you think Jake is just being a businessman? Or do you think that Jake is a bad person? How do we feel about this? Because at the end of the day, he didn't steal something at gunpoint. He didn't break into somebody's house, right? But is that bad as well that he tricked SunSun? Or was he just a businessman? Discuss in the comment section. Bless.